I've changed my mind. I think Scotland should stay in the Union. And there is a very sensible plan for Scotland in the Union. And the result of a no vote, in good faith, in order to demonstrate the equality of the constituent nations in the United Kingdom, the way forward should be Westminster transferring all of the UK's economic, political, welfare, immigration, defence, foreign policy decisions to Edinburgh. All of the revenue from the UK's natural resources goes to the Exchequer in Edinburgh. The UK's central bank, which is currently called the Bank of England, will be the Bank of Scotland. And in recognition, obviously, of England's higher contribution to that Exchequer, we give them a slightly higher block grant, which they should be thankful for. The BBC moves its headquarters to Pacific Quay in Glasgow. 80% of the programming is on Scottish themes set in Scotland, featuring Scottish accents. The main news will be from Glasgow. Afterwards, obviously, Wales, Northern Ireland and England will get their regional news. That's only appropriate. For the next 300 years, the United Kingdom is controlled from Edinburgh. 300 years after that is controlled from Cardiff. 300 years after that is controlled from Belfast. Wouldn't it happen? It's fantasy land. It's so far into the realms of satire that it's ridiculous. And yet, that is the reality of Scotland within the UK, that we've accepted as normal. You pose that to people in England, they would think, well, that's completely ludicrous, because the reality for them is obviously very different. So I think we have to start thinking about whether or not this is actually a partnership, whether or not this is real equality, what the United Kingdom actually is. It does not serve Scotland. It's never served Scotland. It's simply a means of making sure that the resources and the labour and the wealth that's created all across the UK flows towards London and is controlled by London. And we've all woken up to that. Now, I think people are aware of it. Subconsciously, they're aware of it. Because it doesn't take much when you're having a conversation with somebody who's I don't know. It doesn't take much for you to say, well, in the 70s, when North Sea oil was discovered, they commissioned an independent report called the Macron Report, which discovered that actually, if Scotland were independent, to nationalise its oil industry would be one of the richest countries in the world. That was a report commissioned by the Tories, not by nationalists. So they buried it. The incoming Labour administration buried it. There's a wee chummy handshake between the Tories and Labour in Westminster to make sure the Scottish people never found this out, because they knew that it would lead to this. So, that's the ways in which we are better together. And I think there's a better way ahead for Scotland. I think Scottish decisions made by people who live here, who care about the future of this place, who understand this place. Actually, in the aftermath of the Second World War, that settlement, that consensus, where we had council house building, we had the welfare state, we had the NHS. If that was the Britain we're still living in, I wouldn't be making this speech, to be quite honest with you. I don't think Scotland necessarily should be independent just because. I think Scotland should be independent because everybody in this country will be living in a better place. Now, we know that that settlement was ripped up in 1979 by Margaret Thatcher, who simply wanted to put a spear in this hand and a spear in that hand and say to people, right, fight. That's what society looks like now. And all through the 1980s, Scots knew it. They knew that's what was happening, and we voted against it. We voted against it time and time again, and it didn't make any difference, because rich people in the south of England benefited from it. That was a system that suited them. It wasn't the system that suited us. I'm a socialist. I'm all about the working class, man. Like nationalism, what a load of shite. What does that mean? The word nationalism is a complete misnomer here. Scottish nationalism is bound up with the struggle for Scottish self-determination. That's what Scottish nationalism is. This movement is actually, by its nature and everything it does, any speech I've ever seen by anybody standing up on a podium like this, and I've done a lot of these events, even Business for Scotland, and they come up and I'm like, all right, here we go, here's where we get the Tory in. And it doesn't happen. They'll say, well, here's how I think Scottish independence will benefit business. And they still talk about wealth distribution. They still talk about social justice. They still talk about making Scotland a more equal place. They still talk about raising the minimum wage. So if these are the people who are in favour of business, are still saying that the Scottish independence they want to see is a fairer one, that's a good sign. At the very least, we will have a movement between the centre and the left, which is the mirror opposite of what's happening in Westminster. We've now got 4 parties down there that are dedicated to preserving the status quo. We've tried everything. We've tried a Labour government. Even when we got the governments we voted for, they'd recalibrated themselves to appear respectable to voters in the south of England. Abandoned the north of England, abandoned Scotland, abandoned Wales. So we can't trust the Labour Party. We can't trust the Lib Dems. Obviously we can trust the Tories, you know what I mean? That's a given. But we can trust ourselves. Now, we'll make mistakes in independent Scotland. Of course we will. But they'll be our mistakes. And they'll be our successes. So we can move forwards with positivity, without bitterness, simply saying to people, here's the reality of the situation. We can do better than this. And if we vote no, we give away all our power forever. And they will do whatever the hell they like to us. But that's not what's going to happen.